Hey there, Gothamites. Welcome to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Hello, Andrea.
Howdy.
Howdy. It is a sad day, I will go ahead and say. We just learned today that just an hour ago or so, it was confirmed that one of the greatest film composers of cinematic history passed away. Mr. James Horner passed away in a plane crash. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of gutted about it.
This man is responsible for a lot of music from films that we grew up on, like Star Trek II, Aliens,
Avatar,
Rocketeer,
Braveheart,
Swing Kids.
Geez, I mean, there's so many. Field of Dreams. There's so many of his scores, Glory, that rank in my top scores of all time. And God, his scores have brought me to tears a number of times just by listening to them. I can only imagine what they're going to do from here on out. So forgive us if this is a short and sweet episode. We're going to try to do our absolute best. We were going to cover two episodes, part 1 and part 2 of The Demon's Quest. But I kind of feel like we could just make this about the first part, and you can tune in next week for part 2. But before we get into that, Drea, I want to bring up a couple things that were brought up via Twitter and via comic book news.
Is this the fact that Comic-Con is in 2 weeks?
I think it's closer to 3 weeks or so, but
2.5 weeks.
Oh man, it is way. It's coming up way too quickly.
Normally, I'm excited around this time, but I'm feeling a little anxious. Like there's so much we need to do before Comic-Con. Of course, near the actual date, we'll get some event facts out with our appearances and our exciting meet and greets and things like that. But
yeah, will you ever not be on a panel at this entire convention?
One day I will just show up and walk around and eat cotton candy and not work. But I can't. It's my thing. I've got to talk. I've got to talk about psychology and comics. So it's going to happen. But maybe next week we'll talk about those details and try to get the word out about those panels and those appearances.
Yeah. I would hope that we would know everything by next week. I know that you've got like 5 panels. I've got 2. One of those panels, there's some overlap. You and I get to be on a panel together again, which I'm very excited about. We will also be appearing at Fanboy Comics Table sometime throughout the weekend. So be sure to keep an eye out at both your website, Drea, underthemaskonline.com, at your appearances tab. You can also go to fanboycomics.net to learn more about that. And we're very excited. So that should be very cool. There are a couple of things that I want to bring up that are not Comic-Con related. One is a tweet that we got from a listener named Saeed Wilkins. This tweet, I can't believe we didn't think about this. This was a couple weeks ago when we were doing The Mechanic.
Well, we were covering the episode The Mechanic.
We were covering the episode The Mechanic, and yet we weren't thinking about the fact that there was a moment in a previous episode that we could have totally exploited in this conversation. And actually, it wasn't an episode. It was the movie. It was Mask of the Phantasm, which technically in continuity, I don't think it's happened yet for us, but we did it during our 1-year anniversary episode. So there isn't a moment in the movie where during a date with Andrea Beaumont, Bruce sees sort of the prototype of what would eventually become the Batmobile.
So it's a flashback. It happened 10 years ago, so it's a flashback. Presumably, it's before he's Batman, right? So
yeah.
So we see the Batmobile before it's the Batmobile.
Yeah, it's a shiny red version of what we know as the Batmobile. There might be a couple of extra little things on it, a fin there near the cockpit. But for all intents and purposes, it's about as close to the Batmobile as one could possibly get. This leads me to two questions, two possibilities. One is that we see in the flashback of the mechanic, Batman is driving his the classic version of the Batmobile. It's got the face on the front of the car on the hood. It's I believe it was brought into play during like Batman #5. I could be wrong about that, but I think that was it. And he breaks it down and then says, "I need a new car." So he's already seen this car. And this is the one that made him originally, I guess, think about the need for a car. And he got his car. We don't know what happened to it. We just know that it's not running anymore. And that's when he comes across Earl Cooper and says, "I need a new car." And Earl then goes and designs the Batmobile. And we know because we saw the flashback as Earl is telling his version of the story. And we see the drawings and all of this. We also know that Earl was working for a car manufacturer before he got laid off.
So could that have been Earl's model?
I'm wondering if
the World's Fair?
It's not the car that he was showing in his flashback. And in that version, it looks much more like that classic Batmobile that we know. It was sort of an homage, we thought, to that. But I'm wondering if Earl somehow is responsible for having designed this one that was at the World's Fair, this prototype that Bruce became so enamored with. And if so, would that have made it a really bad idea for him to take that body design and use it? Because now potentially that car manufacturer and anyone else who knows the car from the World's Fair knows that Earl Cooper is the man behind the design, which once again just further humanizes this mythological, dark, shadowy figure that's meant to terrify criminals. No?
No. I think that somebody just didn't read the writer's Bible.
You think that it's possible that that maybe the movie didn't so much pay attention to the episodes that came before it.
It's also possible that Bruce Wayne gave Earl some
direction,
some direction, or maybe a sketch, or said, I saw this, beautiful car, the World's Fair, and it had this general shape or had this general, theme to it, and then Earl took that idea and created something similar.
Yeah. It's very possible. I think you're more accurate with the behind the scenes notion that maybe that scene in the movie didn't necessarily go back and reference the fact that they had done the mechanic. I think that's highly likely. It was a nice little nod, but within the context of the world, we know that Bruce has seen what eventually became the Batmobile or something pretty close to it. We know that Earl was a car designer. I think maybe Earl could have designed that original car. It's nice to think about it anyway. I don't know. I thought I would throw that out there, and I want to thank the listener Saeed Wilkins for bringing it up to begin with. Even gave us a frame grab, a screen grab.
Really?
Of the car, yeah. And
wow, he's got a good memory.
Yeah, he does. And I enjoyed having that conversation. It brought up a lot of cool stuff to think about. Second thing I want to bring up is the fact that I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but No Pants Zone now has a completely different meaning.
Why?
Your old friends Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor,
writers for the Harley Quinn comic book.
Indeed. You did a panel with them about Harley and the psychology of Harley. And they wrote an issue of the Harley Quinn comic that apparently sort of solidifies what all the fans have wanted for the last 20 some odd years, which is Harley and Ivy to get together romantically. It was suggested that the two of them have a romantic encounter, that they may be even girlfriends, although it doesn't come right out and say it. That being said, DC Comics official Twitter actually tweeted on June 12th, yes, they are girlfriends without the jealousy of monogamy. So they have made them a romantic couple.
What does without the jealousy of monogamy mean?
I don't know. Maybe they just don't care. Maybe they don't care if the other is monogamous or not. They're not jealous. They don't, it doesn't matter. The DC Comics just said these two are a couple. Now, a lot of people jumped on this and got really excited over the LGBTQ community and talked about this is great. They're pushing this forward, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. My question for you is, knowing the toxic relationship that we've been discussing with Harley and the Joker, do you think DC Comics is taking an opportunity to split them apart? Like, do you think DC Comics is now realizing this is a couple that shouldn't be together, and we're now kind of driving the wedge between them?
No, I think that for a while now, much of the narratives that coming out of DC Comics, whether they're in animated form or in comic book form or in video game form, have already set that story of those two not being together, of those two acknowledging that they're not good for each other, and wanting us to acknowledge that they're not good for each other.
Yeah, they've always been a little flirty, but this, for them to come right out and say it last week, I think was sort of an interesting move. But
well, you've seen in the recent comic books, in the Batman comic, and in some of those side stories where they're not necessarily, again, they're written together, but they're much of the dialogue, much of the story is going toward them being apart, breaking up, and not being good for each other.
Right.
And I think that DC has acknowledged that.
Yeah. Part of that is the Joker disappearing for a good part of these last couple of years. I mean, he was gone for quite a while before Death of the Family, and then Death of the Family shows up, and then he sort of disappears again for a long while, presumed dead. We all know that he wasn't, but So yeah, the question becomes, well, with him gone, is she given the opportunity to move beyond that toxic relationship and find something that's better? And is that with Poison Ivy?
Well, I think that the point here is that she can be written as a character in her own right, that she doesn't need the Joker to be a part of her story.
Oh, I totally agree.
And Jimmy and Amanda have done a really wonderful job of writing this comic book where she's not an accessory to him. She's not a tragedy to him. She's not this one-dimensional character. She has her own agency. She has her own adventures. She confuses us with whether she's good or bad. And I think that she has so much more dimension than we really ever have seen. Yeah. It reminds me of her stories back with the animated series where, yes, a lot of times I think probably all of those times she's seen with the Joker, but she's really a fascinating character. We love her because she is this fascinating character. So to see her evolve to who she is now is I think really interesting, and we don't need to necessarily see her alongside the Joker. No, I've always loved Harley, whether she was next to the Joker or not.
I wanted to get your take because I know that you two are sort of conflicted. You realize that it's a bad relationship, but at the same time, you love seeing them together. I think most people love seeing them together. So I was interested by that. I definitely wanted to ask you about it and get your take as a psychologist and someone who deals with relationships like this on a regular basis. And I'm glad that I was able to ask you. So thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about this week's episode. This week I'm very excited about because it's another one of those episodes of Batman the Animated Series that comes straight out of the comics. This is The Demon's Quest Part 1 of 2 parts. And the cool thing about this is they even gave the man who's responsible for the comic the opportunity to write the teleplay. And that's Denny O'Neil, the great Denny O'Neil, of course. The man responsible for giving us Ra's al Ghul to begin with. He, of course, created Ra's al Ghul along with Neil Adams, famous Batman artist, and they did it with an issue called Daughter of the Demon, which sounds very much like the Demon's Quest. And it was this story.
And it's really unlike any other episode from Batman the Animated Series. We've seen Batman leave Gotham City and go on these quests, and we've seen flashbacks where he's been in other towns. But this is an adventure that goes through all of these different countries, and it's very, there's something Indiana Jones about all of these this huge quest that he has, and it's quite, it stands out as very different than the other episodes.
It's kind of interesting that you actually said something very Indiana Jones about him, and it is. They are globetrotting. They are going from this country to that country to that country, and you really do get this adventurer sort of mentality. You mentioned Indiana Jones, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams actually have said, they've gone on record and said that his creation and even his image, the portrayal, the depiction of Ra's al Ghul has been inspired by many fictional works, but James Bond specifically was a particular inspiration. Not the character of Bond specifically, but Lord Draco, who is this sort of crime boss, international jet-setting crime boss, and at one point in time, he actually wants his daughter to marry James Bond, and we get a little of that with Ra's al Ghul. And
so he's sort of created out of this James Bond villain.
Yeah, a little
Draco.
bit. Yeah, a little bit. And that's from it's right on the Her Majesty's Secret Service. Actually, one of my favorite stories, George Lazenby was Bond for that film. But
Draco is also in the House of Slytherin.
And whenever you're dealing with someone from the House of Slytherin,
it's bad,
or the Al Ghuls, then you know that you are in trouble. But this is a guy who's insanely smart. In fact, his entire existence, he has done nothing but respect Batman and Bruce. More accurately, Batman. Like, I don't know that it respects Bruce. I think he sees through the Bruce Wayne persona. He sees them. I think, like we have said, I think he sees Batman as the real man.
Well, he's very wise. He can look past the ego, the identity that is Bruce Wayne. He's interestingly, he's not interested in Bruce Wayne, who most of us are kind of fascinated because he's this billionaire, he's mysterious, he's distant, but Ra's al Ghul is completely
No.
What?
Now that we're actually talking about him, you're gonna have to do it correctly. Ra's
Al Ghul.
Ra's al Ghul.
Raj al Ghul.
Ra's al Ghul.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Huh. So let's talk about this week's episode. We actually open up at Gotham University, presumably where Dick Grayson has been hanging out while his mentor has gone blind and has gone and done things without him over the last couple of weeks. And he is out doing things without Batman now. He's, we see him in costume. It's rainy. He's going back to his dorm room. He's climbing up the window, and or maybe he was just out with Batman. We don't know. And he comes in through the window and is instantly tranquilized in his own room. I mean, how bad is that? This is why Batman didn't call on him when he went blind. He's like, you're likely to get tranquilized in your own dorm room.
Why was he breaking into his own dorm room?
Because I think if he tries going up the stairs or the elevator
that's right.
in his dorm wearing the Robin costume.
Yes, I forgot he's in costume.
Yeah. So he is tranquilized immediately by these shadowy figures, one in wearing, it's like dark ear-like things. Not so dissimilar to a Batman silhouette, but a little different.
A little bit more sinister than that.
Yeah. And then we see that sinister looking person is actually wearing sort of a mask very much like the Anubis masks from Egypt, which is the dog-like god. And we then go to the Batcave, where Batman says that he actually hasn't seen Robin or Dick Grayson, and no one has for the last couple of days. And he's worried.
Well, which means he's been asking around for Dick Grayson and Robin. Now, aren't people going to kind of put those two facts together?
I don't know that he's asking the same people.
Have you seen Robin? No. Also, have you seen Dick Grayson?
Yeah, I think that's probably very much how it is. I think he walks up to a certain person as Bruce and is like, excuse me, sir. Have you seen Dick Grayson? And that person says no. And then 20 minutes later, he shows up. Have you seen this guy? His name's Robin. He has no merch in the Gotham Batman store.
No, sadly.
Yet. But have you seen him?
Well, maybe if Robin weren't sneaking up into his room and he actually used the hallways at Gotham University, people would have been like, oh, I saw him 2 nights ago.
Yeah, he was walking into Dick Grayson's dorm room, actually. Yeah, well, then that would have just gotten Robin in trouble. Robin would have been, suspect number 1 for the kidnapping of Dick Grayson. So, you really can't win either way. But the point is, Batman has not heard from Dick in 2 days. I guess I then have to wonder, maybe how long has it actually been? Because I imagine that Bruce probably didn't care if he didn't hear from Dick for a couple of days.
So,
It's probably been like a week.
So you're saying that it's been 2 days since he's tried to look for him?
Yeah, he's been spending the last 2 days looking for him. But as we know about Bruce, it's probably been like a month and a half. He's probably been like,
where's that kid?
He's not been by the Batcave.
Maybe you've yelled at him one too many times.
Maybe he's going to find someone who will celebrate Christmas with him without asking, for violence. Anyway, no one has seen him. This entire podcast is going off the rails. No one has seen him, but conveniently, an envelope was delivered via messenger for Bruce Wayne.
No, it can't be.
It's a photograph of Robin in a very compromising position. He's tied up. He's got daggers that are right next to him. It's very threatening. It's very like leave the cash
in
the
disturbing.
Garbage can.
And he's disturbed by it. I mean, we see his expression is he's haunted by this photo. It's really bad.
Yeah. And he's not really even given an opportunity to react before he is interrupted in his own Batcave.
So, they know your identity, Detective.
By none other than Ra's al Ghul. Now, for those who don't necessarily remember, we've been introduced to Ra's once before on a video screen at the tail end of the episode Off Balance, which introduced us to Talia al Ghul, one of the people who knows the identity of Batman.
Right. In that episode, she actually takes the cowl off of him while he's unconscious. Mm-hmm. And so she knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman.
Yeah.
And she escapes at the end of that episode. And we realize that it's Ra's al Ghul who's sort of the mastermind of her mission from that episode. And so I think we even talked about the possibility that she would tell him who Batman is.
Yeah, exactly. And we know just from that brief 30-second moment that Ra's al Ghul had a bit of respect for Bruce, for Batman. He realized that this was a guy who was going to be a worthy adversary. And you got the impression that Ra's al Ghul doesn't come across very many worthy adversaries. And that got us excited for what is becoming this episode. And Ra's tells Batman that Talia has also been kidnapped and that they were taken on the same day, and he requires Batman's help.
Okay then, for openers, look at the blade. It's used by a cult of mercenaries based in Calcutta. Even the rope appears to be made of a hemp indigenous to that area.
Well done, Detective. You are worthy of your reputation.
Ra's is impressed, and they immediately jump on board a plane to go to Calcutta. As Bruce is starting to exit the Batcave, he is walking ahead of Ra's al Ghul, and Ra's manservant, assistant, bodyguard, Ubu, pushes Batman.
Infidel!
Forgive my servant. He feels that no one should precede me. Call it overzealousness.
I think I'll call it strike one.
For starters, why is Bruce leaving the Batcave before these two anyway? I'd be like, hey, you guys...
I need to shut some things down.
Yeah, you guys mosey along. I'll be right behind you.
Just shut down the Bat computer.
Yeah, he's very trustworthy. He's very trusting at this point. It's a little scary. Apparently, Batman's just okay with everybody knowing.
What can you do?
Nothing. So they go off to India, and Ra's explains that he learned or figured out who Batman was because he was able to deduce that this man must be rich and that Bruce Wayne is the only person who has bought all of the necessary equipment and tools and gadgets that would be something Batman would use. So Ra's al Ghul was able to deduce that Bruce Wayne must be Batman, which is kind of impressive, except we know that his daughter already knows who he is. So
right.
it's one of those things where Bruce is like, you could have saved a whole lot of time if you just asked your daughter what my name was.
Next time I'll have to glue my mask on.
Well, we know now that after having rewatched this whole episode, we know that there's a reason why Ra's needs to kind of come across as if he's not as knowledgeable about
right
Bruce and Talia. So
right,
it's a bit of a cover.
Ra's al Ghul appears to be sick. He's doing a lot of coughing. He's not a particularly strong character at this point in time. And once again, Bruce starts to walk in front of him, and once again, Ubu knocks him aside.
Infidel! Okay, that's two.
Oh, Ubu.
That's when they are attacked. And neither Ra's al Ghul nor Ubu are doing their part in actually fending off these people. In fact, Ra's appears to be loving the fact that Batman is taking this group on by himself.
Yeah, he's sort of staring at him with adoration, and I don't know. It's an interesting scene.
It's almost like he's animated to be like Vincent Price, sort of. It was excellent. You're kind of creeped out by watching how he's enjoying watching this fight.
Yes.
And you just get the sense that there's something that's not quite right with him.
Like maybe he's a bit sadistic.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, quite possibly. Like, you don't even necessarily get the sense that he cares who wins.
Right.
He just enjoys watching the fight. Just, I don't know. Do you have anything to say about that? People who, just enjoy watching scraps like that in Calcutta?
People who aren't necessarily betting on either side.
yeah. They're, I'm not really rooting for anyone. I just really like the fight.
Yes.
So it's determined that they're actually in the wrong place. They don't need to be in Calcutta. They need to be in Malaysia. And so they're in this little safari jeep, and Raish asks him if he's enjoying the sights because they are in one of the world's final rainforests.
The world depends upon its oxygen, yet the rich see only profit in its destruction. You, who belong to the overclass, have much to answer for.
He is holding Bruce and the other 1%ers responsible for the destruction of the rainforests. And I don't know, maybe we're getting a little poison ivy eco-terrorist sort of vibe here. What do you think?
Yeah, he makes a comment about humankind needing to serve the planet, or being at service to the planet. And so there's that sense of, humans aren't necessarily as worthy as this, this larger ecosystem, if you will, that we need to kind of humble ourselves.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he's the most egocentric figure. He always needs to walk in rooms first. He wears this sort of very royal outfit,
cape, and it is a very
he sort of contradicts himself.
Bruce Wayne donates millions of dollars a year to preserve these forests.
He's saying that, hey, don't blame me. I actually do a lot to help these places.
Bruce Wayne does a lot.
Right, Bruce Wayne. Now, is he referring to the fictional hybrid of Bruce and Batman? Why is Batman referring to himself in the third person when the people he's sitting in a car with know exactly who he is?
I think this is a universal thing, or for at least Batman / Bruce's concept of himself. Like, this is not just because he's speaking to Ra's al Ghul, that when he's in his Batman costume, he has to refer to Bruce Wayne as a separate identity, as another person, because he can't reconcile, he can't combine Batman and Bruce Wayne. He's almost trained himself to see these identities as separate. So they're in this Jeep, and there's just the three of them. Batman, Ra's al Ghul, and his number one henchman guy, and they're in the middle of a rainforest. Nobody else is around. No one else is going to hear him say, "Oh, and
He's
I donate."
probably sweating under that cowl. He could probably let it loose for a little bit.
It's so strange and off-putting. The entire episode, throughout these travels throughout these different countries, he's wearing the cape and cowl. So when he's in the back of this Jeep, he's wearing the cape and cowl. When he's later we see they're in a helicopter, and he's got this almost like,
it's a big winter Himalayan coat.
It's like a Hoth Echo Base.
It is an Echo Base coat, yes.
And it's quite appealing, but then we see that he has his cowl on underneath that. So he is strangely, even when they're patrolling the little alleyways of Calcutta, he's in his Batman costume.
Now, so what I'm hearing is you think this might be a little strange, but I'm wondering if instead of strange, what he's doing is saying, look, you might know whose face is under this cowl, but I'm showing you the real me. By pretending to be Bruce Wayne, I would be putting on a facade.
Right.
I'm showing you the real detective, Batman. And I should point out that Ra's seems fine with this.
Right.
He never questions the fact that the great detective needs to put the cowl back on.
Right.
In fact, he almost appears to revel in interacting with the Batman more than he does Bruce or Bruce Wayne.
Right. And I think it's a part of this calling, right? You asked Batman to show up to this particular mission. Batman is who you're going to get. Oh, by the way, we're driving through these rainforests. Bruce Wayne donated money to these rainforests. But Batman is here with you now to get to the bottom of this mission. So, part of it, I think, is yes, his strange division with these identities and his need to keep Bruce Wayne separate. But I think you're right about what he needs to be right now is Batman. He needs to fight off these street ninjas. He needs to, later we'll see he needs to fend off these machine gun toting skiers. Like, there's all sorts of crazy things that happen.
It's another James Bond sort of referencing. Yeah. Her Majesty's Secret Service. Yeah,
like 10 different snow jobs show up and start, trying to blast him. So,
well, let's get to that point. Okay, so they get to this temple, and in this temple they find a map, and Batman suddenly finds himself trapped. A door closes behind him, and the next thing he sees is this Black Panther coming through, and Batman then has to fight the Black Panther. Now he does so by removing that cape and cowl that at this point is probably super sweaty and nasty from all these travels, and he wraps the Panther up in it and holds it all with one arm. So not only is this cape and cowl big enough to fit an entire Panther in it, he is able to lift all of that with one arm. That they should be making trash bags out of this material. It is so strong that that's a commercial right there. But he then slips a little drug inside of it, little gas in this little sort of pill form, and puts the Panther into a slumber. He knocks it out, which is very cool. Once again, though, Ra's al Ghul and Ubu standing off to the side, not participating in any way, shape, or form this battle with the Panther.
Well, Ra's al Ghul is very sick.
He is very sick. Ubu seems to be pretty sturdy, though. He's been pushing Batman around a couple of times, and has heartily thrust him into walls. So I think that maybe he could have participated a little. But Batman is very pleased with himself. He is...
Well, you would be if you just held a Panther up like a hefty bag in your cape.
Yeah, and he allows Ra's and Ubu in this point to go ahead of him.
After you.
He now seems to be keeping a really close eye on his two traveling partners. So they determined that they have to go to the Himalayas.
Of course.
Batman, Ra's al Ghul, Ubu are in Ra's personal helicopter, and the three of them are choppering in over the Himalayas. Batman puts on his big Hoth Echo base coat and his parachute, jumps out of the helicopter, and just as he looks back at the helicopter, we see that it's a rocket has been fired and it blows up the helicopter. My God, it's like Ra's al Ghul and Ubu are no more. Batman, though, doesn't seem too concerned. He's like,
no,
they weren't really helping anyway. All the people we fought, they didn't do anything. So Batman continues, ends up finding a cave where Robin is sitting on what appears to be sort of a throne on the other end of the hallway. He is tied up and unable to help Batman in any way, particularly as Batman is attacked by even more guards, and he fights them off. Once he has beaten them, the torches in the room illuminate, and Batman and Robin are joined by that weird Anubis-looking figure who's also wearing an outfit very similar to something that we may recognize. I don't know. It's green and gold, and Batman knows exactly who it is.
Ra's al Ghul.
Batman has known for a really long time that he's been taken on this ride. He has allowed them to sort of unfold their plan. He's interested to see where it all leads. Hopefully at the end it was going to lead to Robin, and it has. So he takes Robin and he's like, come on, let's get out of here.
The Master gave you no permission to leave.
I didn't ask for any.
He throws a punch toward Batman. Batman catches his hand, and we've seen that he can hold a panther in his cape and gown with just this one arm. So he's well strong. He crushes Ubu's hand and tosses him aside.
Sit, Ubu, sit.
Yeah. Ubu's a big guy, and Batman just tosses him. I mean,
He's pissed.
I'm starting to think that maybe Batman's like roided up a little bit on this journey. And Talia reveals herself to them. She had not been kidnapped at all. She's fine. She's right there.
And she implies that she was a part of all of this, this plan to get Batman there. And his expression when he sees her is unlike anything. He's just...
It's very similar to when he saw the photo
right.
of
right.
Robin.
He's sort of, I mean, he's clearly upset, but he's also kind of disgusted by all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit, because Raish basically lays out his plan.
My time is short. I have no sons. I need a man to assume my position when I am gone.
Then it was a test? But why me?
Because you are most worthy. That is now proven beyond any doubt. And because my precious daughter loves you.
Drea, they only knew each other for like 2 hours in this environment that was A, hostile, and B, after they got out of it, it was determined that she was a liar. She stole the equipment that they had been trying to get, and he didn't trust her because he sabotaged that equipment.
Right. When Raish says that, Batman's expression is like, "How can this be? You're." It's almost like he feels yet again betrayed or hurt by this woman. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting, there are a few moments here where there's no dialogue. He just sort of stares at her, kind of perplexed and hurt and angry and betrayed. And it's great, but yeah, you're right. They have only spent a few hours together.
Yeah, I've got to ask, because, I've been listening to the things that you've been teaching us over the last, the last year and a half. I'm going to do a little diagnosing. She is someone who is maybe misinterpreting these events with him. She's maybe forming connections that, are different from the actual connect. Like, she's perceiving them differently. Mm-hmm. She's clearly a dangerous woman. I'm going to go with borderline disorder. Is she misjudging this relationship?
Wow. Well, I agree with you that she seems to have this distorted perception of them, that she's already sort of implying that there is a possibility of love between them, even after just one meeting. One meeting
that didn't end up very well.
Right. And yeah, she is a dangerous person, or she's been dangerous in the past. I will say, though, that just being dangerous isn't necessarily a symptom of borderline personality disorder. Some of the things you're saying could potentially lead to that diagnosis, but we don't have enough information here.
We're going to need another episode?
We're going to need another episode.
Oh, okay.
Which we have, luckily, ahead of us.
That's true.
But for folks who are unaware or need a reminder of what borderline personality disorder is, it is one of the many personality disorders. By personality disorder, we mean a more long-standing, enduring, kind of like a lifetime characterological mental health problem. It's characterized by some of the things you talked about, like having some interesting perceptions about interpersonal relationships. Primarily, that there's this perceived bonding or connectedness when there is not one, mm-hmm. which is we're kind of seeing here. But
except that Batman clearly feels a little something. Like, there is a little bit of connectedness, but it seems like for her to be going, "Daddy, I love him already." Maybe it's a little too soon.
Well, if you met Batman,
I haven't even met him, and I already love it.
I was gonna say, how do you not love Batman?
he drives a car in a town when he shouldn't. It's, they're just little, and apparently he chooses the designs of cars that have already existed at the World's Fair.
I knew I loved him before I met him.
Oh, that happened.
Okay, so back to Borderline. Mm-hmm. Characterized by instability of interpersonal relationships. Much of that is kind of caused by the person, right? So we kind of think of people with borderline personality disorder as being a bit more dramatic. So having this tendency to be attracted to dramatic, unstable, erratic relationships. I'm not sure we're seeing that here because we don't really see, they haven't really had an opportunity to have a relationship. So that's not really here.
But there is a lot of drama. There's a lot of flash in this relationship. We're definitely going to see some in a moment. But yeah, lots of drama, lots of sparks. You don't think the first time they met, going up against Count Vertigo, was very dramatic? Lots of gestures. She took his cowl off while she was, tending his wounds and
sure, but a lot of the drama that I'm referring to is the drama between the two people. So like this constant worry that he would leave me, this this strong, almost irrational attachment. That they don't call me back. They must be wanting to leave me, or have this intense irrational fear of abandonment, or I must follow and stalk that person, or I must track their calls, or these behaviors that kind of create this drama when it doesn't have to be there.
Can I present to you that the whole point of this episode is to basically hook is for Ra's al Ghul to hook Batman up with his daughter.
Yeah.
Anyway, like this, you've got to prove yourself worthy. Basically, my daughter says she loves you. I'm dying. I need someone to take over for me. You're that guy.
If she were behind all this, yeah, that would be intensely dramatic, and yeah, that would fall in line with this. There are other things though that I'm not seeing here, like self-injurious behavior, trying to hurt oneself, or telling someone they're gonna end their life. So of course, being incredibly not just threatening, but also doing so in a frightening way. So kind of scaring someone into being with them by threatening that they're going to hurt themselves. And poor self-image, so poor self-value, not thinking highly of oneself, which can lead to some of these things that we just talked about.
That would not be anyone in the Al Ghul family.
No. None of the Al Ghuls. So I applaud you for kind of pointing out some of the characteristics of borderline personality disorder and thinking that she might have that tendency, or this might go in that direction. And who knows, maybe we'll get more information that will prove your point.
Is this one of those diagnoses where you only need like 3 out of 5? Or do you need them all? Because if you got 3 out of 5, maybe she fits. Maybe there's a chance. Look, I'm just looking for a way to be right in one of these.
Let's just say that it is insufficient. Not only because you need more than 3 out of 5, but because even the symptoms that you brought up do not fall into that, do not meet that criteria just yet.
Okay, so we'll give it another episode. Ra's then collapses from his sickness, and they end up taking him to the Lazarus Pit. Now, the Lazarus Pit is essentially this, for lack of a better word, I mean, it's sort of Fountain of Youthy. It's a giant pool. It looks a little hot springsy, but it also looks very violent.
You want us to put him in that? You're crazy.
They lower him into the pit, and what should kill him actually revives him quite dramatically. In fact, when he comes out, it's almost as if he is a demon himself. He becomes a bit maniacal and emerges from this pit with renewed strength. In fact, he picks Talia up, holds her over his head, and just laughs maniacally. we know from having read the comics, this is exactly what the Lazarus Pit does. It drives you mad for a bit.
So it alters you physically and emotionally and mentally, right?
Absolutely.
So we don't know a lot about whatever compound is in there, right? Like the idea is that there is some mystical nature about this pit. That, again, from the comics, we know that Ra's al Ghul has discovered this pit and use it to basically be immortal.
Yes.
But
yes,
what
we find that he's been alive for 600 years.
Right. But what we're just realizing with this scene is that there are some side effects of using that pit as a restorative intervention, if you will.
Would this go toward... Seems weird to say, but would this go toward like the addictions that we've talked about in the past? This need for the Lazarus Pit in order to survive, and maybe prolonged use, giving you worse effects than benefits?
Totally. I mean, if you think about restorative compounds, like what comes up for you, probably anabolic steroids, probably muscle enhancement supplements, or any speed types of drugs that are temporary, or types of compounds that are temporary but have this altering experience that's so good that you want to go back to it, even though it could have these negative side effects, right? So there are the ups and downs related to it. There's an immediate high. In this case, it's a physical and mental high. You're suddenly as strong as a bear, suddenly as sharp as a nail, and apparently you're also like maniacal.
Yeah.
You're laughing wildly, and you're willing to hold a family member up over the cliff wildly.
I guess that sort of thing would almost have to happen if you've cheated death, if you've been lowered into this and it's sort of violently revived you. I can only imagine that it's doing something to your brain that throws you into this temporary insanity.
And sometimes it's the high of just having that restorative or euphoric experience that people want to get after. So even if, like, again, let's take anabolic steroids as an example. It's basically injecting yourself with testosterone, like high amounts, inhuman amounts of testosterone, right? Even though the side effects can be, incredibly damaging and embarrassing. Like, people know high amounts of testosterone for men. Thinking, of athletes and bodybuilders, the side effects are kind of bad, right?
Yes, you can become severe mood swings. You can lose your hair. There are other physical attributes that can maybe disappear. It's a family show.
Right. There's some.
Let's just say there are things that you don't want to do. Steroids, one of them, because body parts could shrivel up and die.
It could impact the size of certain body parts for men and the drive, if you will. However, despite those side effects, the high of being, on that kind of adrenaline-like, in those adrenaline-like moments, and having the physique that comes with it, seems to balance that out. Seems to almost be better than those negative side effects.
Right.
So the Lazarus Pit, I was thinking about what could these restorative compounds be. I think a good analogy would be steroids, because after, if you don't take steroids for a while, you go back down in size, and you don't have that high anymore. You don't have that what's that pump?
Get your pump?
What's that pump? Yeah, pump.
Get your pump on.
Get your pump on.
Yeah.
Which you can get naturally, by the way, just from
Actually
lifting.
getting a pump on?
Right. And I thought about other restorative compounds. I mentioned other supplements and enhancements, but placenta apparently is a restorative compound.
Sure.
people have been.
But is it actually, or is that more superstitious?
People actually, I mean, testimonials by people who ingest placenta do say that it can be restorative in terms of making their skin younger and making their moods better. I just want to imagine that the Lazarus Pit is just a giant pool of placenta.
Do it. You should imagine that.
I will.
Go right ahead.
I will.
We'll talk about that on the next episode. If you have questions about the giant pit of placenta known as the Lazarus Pit, you should email us at arkhamsessions@gmail.com. But please, proceed.
It's a cliffhanger.
It is a cliffhanger.
Like, literally, we're hanging on the Lazarus Pit cliff.
That is true. Drea, are you excited about taking a look at next week's episode, the second part of this cliff?
Yes, because I think we'll figure out whether it's placenta in that pit.
That's true. You know what we're also going to do? We actually got a couple of emails and tweets about this episode from listeners. Because we're not going to do the second half of this episode, we're going to save those for next week's episode. So I know we've got one from our old friend Bernardo Shea. I know we've got one from Leah. They both ask good questions. Got a couple other folks who have tweeted into us with questions about the Demon's Quest. So definitely come back next week and let's wrap this one up with some awesome psychology. Drea, ultimately, what did you think about this particular episode? Do we have a lot to go on, or are we getting to a point where we could actually talk a bit about Raish and Bruce and their relationship? Because something I want you to think about over the next week as we gear up for part 2 is maybe the similarities between these two. Like, maybe I see a lot more similarities than I actually see differences. Right. As scary as that might sound.
Right. And actually, up to the very last scene where Raish goes into the Lazarus Pit, it sounds like all of this, all of these adventures were actually leading just to Raish being connected with Bruce and being able to have this conversation about Bruce taking on the role of Raish. Mm-hmm. Now, I guess my question would be, why didn't he just go to the Lazarus Pit to begin with? He knows it exists.
Yeah, but the whole point was to find the guy who's going to be able to take over for him one day.
Sure.
I think he also wants to know if this guy is good enough for his daughter, and maybe even good enough to be his adversary.
Well, I think that there's an element of father-son relationships here too, mm-hmm. because there's this implication that I've discovered you are good enough to take my place. Therefore, you and I are aligned in some way. You and I could be related. I see you fit for my daughter. I mean, all these things point to I'm somewhat of an older mentor / father figure potentially for you. If I could teach you the ways of being an Al Ghul. So that should just be.
It's going to be the title of my autobiography, The Ways of the Al Ghul.
So, and we saw that, it's so funny because Robin was kidnapped and Talia was presumably kidnapped. And at some point, Raish had said, we have to do this for the children. So again, implying there's this sort of parental element of Raish that we're seeing here. And could that mean that both Robin and Batman have this mentor, have someone who is just as mysterious, just as powerful, just as out there as they are, and could live in their world and coexist with them. Mm-hmm. I think that's the first time that Batman has ever met someone who could potentially be on the same level as him.
Yeah, scary. Scary. Mm. Join us next week for part 2 of this conversation. Drea, until then, where can folks find you?
On Twitter, I'm at Arkham Asylum Doc, and my website is underthemaskonline.com.
You can also tweet us both. We are at Arkham Sessions. You can tweet me. I am at bward028. And you can email us. We are arkhamsessions@gmail.com. As always, be sure to check out fanboycomics.net for all kinds of cool information. They've got some great podcasts over there and some great comics too. So be sure to check that out. They will also have a detailed list of where you can find us at Comic-Con. Plus, you should definitely follow them on Twitter. They are Fanboy Comics, comics with an X. Until next week, I am Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
the Arkham Sessions.